Ever felt like your darkest fears of being watched were actually true? Well, this powerful documentation pulls back the curtain on life as a targeted individual, where privacy becomes fiction and safety an illusion. This series stands as both documentation and resistance, a refusal to be silenced despite overwhelming odds.
Hello, welcome to the Dire-Rie of a Sane Black Woman. I'm Marie, your host. Today, I want to talk to you about the ripple effect. And the ripple effect can pertain to many things, whether that's gossip, slander, harassment, or even silence. So just to give you a visual, if you can just sit down and imagine when a stone hits the water, ripples spread. So that means one choice, one word, or even one silence doesn't stay still, right? It moves outward, essentially shaping the people around us. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the ripple effect. And I remember I came across this term when I was taking a training essentially at work. It was about workplace harassment and workplace bullying and how to spot it and, different things that basically encompasses that subject matter. So when we got to the term the ripple effect, they showed an image of people essentially following each other over a hill. And that hill, at the end of that hill, was nothing, right? So they were going to actually fall over. But because everyone was just blindly following each other, they were just going with the flow, right? Regardless of where that was leading them to. And so that is what the ripple effect is all about. The image was essentially meant to illustrate how easily we follow the crowd, even when it leads to harm. And that could be harm to yourself as well as others, right? And so, in psychology or workplace training, that's what they use, or that's what they call the ripple effect. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about how silence and participation creates ripples that either uphold justice or reinforce harm. Now, let's define the term, right? So let's start with the actual definition of the ripple effect. So I gave you a brief illustration of what that might look like. I gave you some examples. I gave you a visual example as well as, just basic things that people can do that reflects a ripple effect. And so in psychology and workplace training, the ripple effect is defined as the phenomenon where a single action or event spreads outward, influencing others beyond the immediate situation. So, like a stone dropped in water, the impact radiates in waves, affecting not just the first person, but everyone connected to them. So, in parallel, there is another term, so conformity. Now, conformity is the tendency to adjust our behavior, attitudes, or beliefs to align with the group, right? The group can be any group, right? Whatever group you subscribe to, whatever group you're trying to fit in with, right? So even when the group is clearly wrong, you basically follow along, you go along with it, right? And so Solomon asks, famous experiments showed people giving obviously incorrect answers just because everyone else did. So here's the connection. The ripple effect explains how behavior spreads. Conformity explains why people go along with it. And the ripple effect isn't just silence, it's imitation. It's escalation. It's people ganging up without thinking twice. It's the crowd that doesn't question why they're targeting someone. They just follow the pattern. So let's take a look at the ripple effect of silence and harm in my specific story, right? This is the Dire-Rie of a Sane Black Woman. So I do want to give you concrete examples in my life and my story and what I've experienced and what I continue to experience. So as it relates to stalking and harassment, both cyber and in the natural, right, in person, because again, I'm at the stage where it's not just cyber stalking and harassment, it's both cyber and in person. And so if you've watched even my first couple of episodes, you'll know that essentially I'm a targeted individual, right? And so that alone makes me a target for so many things. But in this instance, we're talking about what I've experienced as it relates to cyber harassment, cyber stalking. And so I continue to experience this. So, if you've even watched my first couple of episodes, you'll get hints of, my story and what I've experienced. So this is just another aspect of my story, basically going into the ripple effect. And so what does that look like in a ripple effect situation, right? The cyber harassment, the in-person stalking, the in-person harassment. Well, as previously mentioned, I've experienced stalking and harassment at work, at school, where I live, online, and pretty much everywhere I go, right? So basically, nowhere is safe, right? Not even in my home, which is so sad, right? Where you can't even feel safe in your own home. So the most intriguing part about this whole thing is that no one seems to have the courage to say that this is wrong, at least from what I can see, right? Maybe there are people behind the scenes that are saying this is wrong. Hey, I'm not going to participate in that. But pretty much everyone seems somehow to join in, right? And I can say in some instances, even at school, I've seen instances where people were basically, let's say we had a group presentation, right? And everyone was told that was per instructions, right? Because that was part of my subliminal harassment, that they were going to do something or add something to their slides that would be triggering to me, or, speak on a topic to try to trigger me. And at least I would say two individuals I know, for one of the presentations we had, they decided not to present live. They just submitted their presentation and presented it to the teacher one-on-one. And my suspicions is that they actually did not want to participate in the harassment, but they also didn't have the courage to tell whoever was telling them, hey, let's do this, let's target Marie. They didn't have the courage to say, you know what, I'm not going to participate in that. I'm just going to do my presentation as I see fit, right? But I mean, to a certain extent, I guess I can appreciate that they didn't participate in it. But, I just wanted to call out, there has been instances where people, they actually, when they didn't go along with the crowd, but probably not in a way that I would say they were standing up, for me. And so, my suspicions in why, when we look at the ripple effect, right? The silence, or basically the ripple of harm. Why do people continue to do this? Why do people basically go along with the flow? I don't know, but my suspicions are, right? So if we're looking at this situation and what I've basically, my theory is that with this particular smear campaign, there is a strategy to it, right? So the strategy is, let's get the person that we want to attack Marie, let's get them offended, right? So that's the first step. Let's get that person offended and angry at Marie for whatever reason, whether it's something they said I said, something they said I did, something that they said I subscribed to. And so let's get that person worked up. And once we get them worked up, now we can program them more effectively, and now we can influence them more effectively so that they can now start to target Marie and harass her. And so that is part of it. And now, why would that person potentially not say anything? One, because they're offended, and so they feel like, well, you know what, she deserves it. But also, I think there may be situations where people still think that it's wrong and they know it's wrong, but they go along with it because, again, they want to conform. They want to be part of the group. They don't want to be the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. They want to actually feel a sense of belonging, even if that sense of belonging means doing what's wrong, even if that sense of belonging means hurting someone else. And in other instances, you have people that were, probably blackmailed into basically going along with the flow. Maybe they were told, hey, we know this information about you, and if you do this or if you go there, we're going to basically share that information. And I've had suspicions of that happening, right? So where I previously lived, I had an app that I use for a variety of different things. And there were two individuals that actually helped me with different things before. And there was a time when I was trying to get them to come in to help me with something. And every single time that appointment kept getting canceled, and I couldn't understand why. And I knew why, because obviously I'm a target. And so they were targeting, that particular appointment. And so when I looked into it, I went into the app, and these people, like, I've used them before, but then all of a sudden I couldn't even see their profiles. And so I was like, wait a minute. And one of the individuals actually knows about, like, my whole story about me being a target and everything. So if anything, he would have been the first person, I would think, to call me or to reach out and say, hey, Marie, now I see what you're talking about. Like, they reached out to me too, but I think what happened is that they probably threatened him. They probably said, hey, we know this about you, or whatever it was that they had on him. And he was just like, okay, I'm canceling this. I'm removing my profile or whatever so that, she can't book me anymore, or whatever it was, And so you have that. So there's like instances where they could actually blackmail somebody. And some people, they're just afraid because they're like, wow, if they can do that to her, whoever's doing this, I don't want to get on their bad side. I'm just going to, not even stay out of it. I'm going to join so that I won't ever, come to mind as a target, right? Because I would think if you, like, let's say, just for me, maybe if I was afraid that, look, I don't want to get into it, I don't want to become the next target, I don't think I would have joined, like, the harassment. I don't think I would join the harassment or the stalking. I would probably step aside. But that's just me. That's what I think I would do if I was in that particular situation, or if the tables were turned. Now, as far as workplace experiences, right? So, because again, this training was done in the workplace. And so in my workplace, right, specifically where that training occurred, no one stepped up. No one said anything to me, regardless of their ethnicity. No one stepped up. And, they basically stayed silent. I became suspicious of it, I guess really towards the end, because for a long time, my focus were actually on the students at my university, because they were really explicit about what they were doing, and it was just very obvious. And I didn't speak to anyone at work about what was going on, because obviously I'm like, okay, I don't want to bring my problems into work. I want to try to stay focused on work as I'm at work. And I didn't realize the whole time there was basically collaborations between the different groups that, I don't know at what point they integrated, but it seems like there was an integration that happened, and that, there was collaboration, and people were actually actively both at work and school, basically ganging up on me. And so when people stay silent, when they stay silent and they don't step in, that's also part of conformity, because, they don't want to be that person that is non-conforming, right? They don't want to be, they want to be, in my opinion, right? Because I'm talking about, right? You would think certain people would, quote unquote, be your ally because maybe you share certain demographics with them, or certain things that you share with them that you think that you have in common would make them be an ally, or at least give you a heads up, right? But no, that wasn't the case. And in my situation, I think in some instances people want to be that model employee, right? And so, I'm a Black woman, and so in this instance, there was, in my group, right? I didn't directly work with this person, but there was a Black employee there, a Black female, and she never said anything to me. And now looking back, I realized that she was very aware of what was going on. And sometimes, I mean, we've heard this before, like, some people want to be that model Black employee, or the model minority, right? And so I think, potentially that's the situation that she was in, because unfortunately in the industry that I worked in, and diversity is scarce, and where there is diversity, it's usually in entry level roles, or support roles and things of that nature. As you go up, diversity is not really prevalent. So sometimes I guess people have to look out for themselves, right? So they're trying to look out for themselves. They want to look good. And I think, she also wants to portray herself, or she probably wanted to portray herself as the model Black employee. Look, I'm not like that Black person. I'm different. And, I can't, to a certain extent, I can't, completely blame her for not speaking up, because I understand that, she has a responsibility, she has a child and things like that. So maybe she felt like if she didn't conform, that maybe that could mean that she would lose a paycheck, and that she would not have a job, where she wouldn't get the promotion, or she wouldn't get asked to be a permanent employee. But even still, I still think that there could have still been a way to give a fellow colleague, someone that basically looks like you, a heads up, without jeopardizing yourself, right? I think actually it was the opposite, because I think even outside of this situation, I think there was one time she joined a meeting just basically to go back and feed information, and to say that maybe I wasn't competent enough to handle my particular role. And so just looking at all of this, so that basically proves my point in terms of, like, okay, the token Black person, the model employee kind of situation. And so, that's essentially, maybe, like, if I had to make sense of why did she not speak up, why did she go along with the crowd, even though this was a woman, a Black woman, a woman that looked like me, she didn't speak up for me, but she actually, went along with it, and basically, kept silent. And so, see, that's pretty much it, for that story. I mean, I could go on and on and on about, like, the model employee, or the token Black person, even, one other example I'll probably, share here. I think it's still, relevant. If we look at, you know, if we're looking at, okay, the model Black person or the token Black person, right? Because they want to be the only Black person in that particular department, or they want to be that Black person that, oh, see, I'm not like them situation. Looking back, before I didn't realize this, but now looking back, right? They say that hindsight is 20/20, right? And so now looking back at everything that's happened, and this particular employee, her hair was natural and she always wore it back, in a bun. I think maybe she wore it out naturally a few times, but for the most part, she's worn it in a bun. And all of a sudden, I noticed that her hair was blown out and pressed, and I just thought, oh, okay, yeah, she got a haircut or whatever. And I think we had photos, and I thought it was maybe for the pictures or whatever, but no, now that I'm looking back, I think it was also based on things that were being shared about me, whether they were visual things or different things that were being said about my hair or my hair texture and things like that. And she didn't want to fall in that category. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against pressing your hair. Look, my hair is natural, but I've blown my hair out. I've pressed it. I've worn wigs. I've worn braids. I've gotten relaxers in the past. So I'm pretty versatile when it comes to hair, but my hairstyle does not, like, whatever hairstyle I choose, at least that's how I feel, is not reflective on how other people would look at me and to say, well, okay, she's the model Black person because, okay, her hair is straight kind of situation. But now reflecting back, I think that's what it was all about. Because of all of the things like the breadcrumbs that I've gotten and things that I've seen, that, okay, there were discussions about my hair and my hair texture, my wig, that I wore at the time and things of that nature. And so, yeah, I think that's probably what, influenced her to do that. And so that again goes back to the conformity piece, right? We're talking about the ripple effect, but we're also talking about conforming. So now I've also noticed this in other settings as well, right? So when we're talking about the ripple effect and people not doing what's right. So in other settings, so this individual clearly knew they were talking about me, sharing things about me, even images, but they said nothing because I would see the whispers, the sudden, let's all go to the break room invitation, except, I wasn't invited to go to the break room, right? So that was about like the latest gossip or whatever. So this is still in the workplace setting where, I would notice, okay, someone has their phone, and that whole phone phenomena thing, I noticed it, but at that point, I didn't realize that's what was happening, right? Where someone would get some type of message, and then it's almost like a GPS where they're basically trying to download the information, but they're coming closer and closer to you. And so one of my colleagues, she was in the room with me, and then she started going crazy on her phone, and then I realized she went to the meeting room next to me, and then she was, downloading, whatever it is that she was doing. And then I guess she came across an image, or she came across something. And, at that point, she basically called everyone to go, for a walk or a break room. And then, they shared what they shared, right? They shared their gossip or whatever. And it was obvious that it was about me. And, that's happened in a few instances. Also, there were comments made, by certain people that were pretty senior. Now that I look back on the comments that were made, it leads me to believe that they also knew what was going on, but they never, they didn't speak up, right? When they should have. And so outside of the work setting, I've also experienced that in church settings, right? Whether it be in-person church, online Zoom sessions, whether it's like a course, a prayer, workshop, your regular social media platforms. I've noticed that kind of ripple situation where one person will get something and it'll trigger basically other people to basically start gossiping, sharing screens, sharing information, smirking, laughing. And in the social media setting, right? Let's just take YouTube, for example, right? Where the person, that is basically monitoring me, whatever they're using to monitor me, they'll notice that, oh, okay, she watches this particular channel or she follows this particular person. Now let's try to infiltrate that person's channel, and let's try to taint Marie's image, and so that she'll feel uncomfortable, to follow. So that is also sort of part of the target, right? Part of the tactic of isolation. So not only are they trying to isolate me from like in-person activities, but also online communities, right? So now you have somewhere where you have a plant, right? An audience member is basically a plant. And so they try to get to the host's ears and they try to taint their perception. And so the host will either willfully participate, or, they might be manipulated, because they've been compromised, and they've been compromised either by their algorithm, or someone sent them something, right? Or someone basically directly, someone was in their ear basically telling them something, and they didn't realize that that person was a plant, and it was basically all intentional. And so I've seen that. And so in those instances too, no one speaks up. It's just basically, again, the whole ripple effect. Everyone is basically going along with the flow. Let's just target this person. And, in within church settings, I've been in settings where we're having like deep discussions about spirituality and things of that nature, conversations about being accepting and forgiving. And once that text message comes through, the dynamics change, right? And I've been ridiculed by fellow church members, those I've either just met, but also those that seemed welcoming, but were just doing it to make me part of their circus, right? And so they didn't act any different than the quote unquote world, right? In fact, I would say they acted worse, because they put me in harm's way by basically, in one situation, inviting me to something, right? That seemed like a good time to fellowship. And, actually, when I was invited to this fellowship event, I kind of second guessed it. I was just like, because at the time I was just, I was unpacking. I had just moved, and I was like, oh man, I'm in the middle of unpacking. I don't know if this is a good time. But, I was like, oh, this is a good time, to fellowship, to meet people. And, this person actually reached out to me. And so, let me not be that way. And although I had some concerns, because I did see her in her car at one time downloading stuff, but I was just like, hey, everyone's getting these messages. So, I mean, I guess, out of curiosity, she might just, be downloading or whatever, because as soon as she saw me, she basically turned her car off and walked in behind me. But, even with that, I was just like, hey, maybe she's not like that. Maybe she's like, okay, let's see what Marie's really about outside of whatever messages I've received. And no, that wasn't the case. I was invited to a session, to to a fellowship event. And I from the it was it was a Bible study, but, within the Bible study, they also have like food and things like that. But everything about the setting was a setup. It was a setup. It was a scheme that Todd set up to come to me with the BS, right? So it was a scheme. So basically, from even the food choices that they had, it was basically subtle harassment to, topics of discussion or people that were reflecting. And it was just like, they were reflecting on scriptures, but then using their selves, this is, for me, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like, this sounds kind of like my story. So is it really your story? Is it a coincidence that we have the same story, or we've been feeling the same way? Or is it you're just basically trying to, throw it in my face? And in that event too, there was an individual that I've never seen before at the church, and I don't know if the people that were actually hosting the fellowship invited her, or because obviously my messages and everything are being stalked, that they noticed that I was going to be at this event, and so they sent this other person basically to infiltrate the event, because they've done that before, right? So you have two different things happening at the same time. You have a new person, that I've never seen, that basically came in just to follow me because they knew I was going to be there. And then you have people that, I've spoken to before, I've met, that basically were setting me up for their circus. And, again, that's happened before. Like I said, in one of my episodes, that people have followed me, like have actually taken off from work because they knew, oh, she's going to be at this Bible study. And so they've taken off from work. And I've had that happen a couple of times, or, I see people come in, we're in the middle of the Bible study and they're coming in pretty late. And I'm like, And it's not a person that usually comes to the church, and they show up because I'm there. And so someone sent them to go there. And so that's kind of like things that, I've experienced or whatever. But, just not to go off on a tangent about this, my whole point is that regardless of the different settings that, I've gone through the examples of work or church, there still seems to be like a ripple effect where, and it's a ripple of harm, right? A ripple of harm, a ripple of silence, where no one is speaking up. No one is coming to me. Oh, Marie, I received this message and it's saying that it's about you. Oh, I received this. It seems like you've been hacked, or, something's off, right? No one is speaking up. No one is doing what I would say is right. And they're actually rippling harm and rippling silence. In addition to that, I would say some of the leaders, right? Some of the Christian leaders have participated in this situation, not specifically in that particular church example that I've given, but in just, various church settings. I believe some leaders have kept quiet. And in that particular church setting, I think some of the leaders, and I told them, I basically told them my whole story. And I think they still kept quiet about certain things. And I even asked them, I said, have you received anything? Have you received any messages? They told me no. And, so they say, but I mean, I believe that I've actually seen, at least one person receive a message, and basically get a direction to go to where I was sitting, so that she can confirm that, okay, this message is about this person. And so, that is the example for the church setting. As far as authorities are concerned, I don't know to what extent that maybe my teachers or things like that, what they knew at the time when I was reporting it. But, obviously, I've been in a situation where it was a lot of very dismissive and or some instances I felt like it was victim blaming, and things of that nature. And, I've been labeled, as prideful or just different things, right? Now, as far as police is concerned, where I previously lived, one of the instances when I went to the precinct, and I came back, I think I went and then I came back as a follow-up. I forgot what I went back for. I think he had asked me about some information, and then I came back either with the information or I came back to confirm something. And when I went back, the police officer was smirking. And I was just kind of like, okay, like, why is he smirking? Like, what's going on? And then I was looking at him, like, directly. And then he walked back, like, to the back room to laugh. And I could see him. And I actually confronted him about that. And I even told, I think I had I had a follow-up meeting with them, because I then followed it up with actual formal complaint and letter. And at that point, I was speaking to the detective, and I spoke to the detective about it. I said, look, one of your officers, your officer was laughing. He was smirking. And he said, oh, no. I said, well, maybe he received one of the messages that I'm actually telling you about, and you're saying you don't have any proof. I said, maybe he received one of the vulgar messages or what have you. And he said, no. I said, also, maybe it was about something else, because I'm like, okay, maybe they think I'm like, insane, right? He's like, well, maybe, it was probably the latter. Maybe they thought maybe you're not in your right mind or something. I said, because I did overhear you ask a question on the speaker. And I said, I heard what you said. And he was like, oh, yeah, maybe it was that or whatever. So, in any event. So, I mean, look, it's like, where do you go, right? When people are not taking you seriously, or, they're just basically going on with the flow. They're not speaking up. They're receiving messages too. They're in they're an authority figure, but they're not basically speaking up. And, when it comes to like friends and family dynamics, I mean, I can say at least one member of my family that I know for a fact that has received these messages and that is actively participating. And I've witnessed this person actually disseminate information, and I've seen him do it. At least one person. Now, if there are more, I don't know. Hopefully there isn't, but obviously, what do they say? What's the saying? Where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't know. So you have that. As far as friends and acquaintances are concerned, I mean, I have suspicions about certain people that may be participating in certain things just because of their behavior, of when I receive certain phone calls, like, so that just basically flags it as monitoring. There's like a monitoring spirit behind it kind of situation. As well as things that I think that was revealed to me in the spirit, way before this blew up, right? And so, excuse me. And so if I can look back and just reflect, and so if I can look back and basically just reflect on, okay, what God showed me in the spirit and what's happening now, and, their behavior, now I can kind of piece it together. Because sometimes you might see something in the spirit, or, God might download something in you, and you might be like, no, that person wouldn't do that. Or no, maybe it's just like, it's that's not what it means. Maybe it's something else, right? But now that, fast forward a year later, months later, what was revealed to me looks like what it actually is, right? So that's that. As far as class or classmates are concerned, in terms of the ripple effect, right? So I gave the example about that token Black person example, and how, I was actually, now looking back, I'm like, wow, even another Black woman would actually go along with this and not say anything. And unfortunately, in all of this whole harassment, cyber stalking campaign, like, you have a lot of Black people who are actually targeting me too. You have a lot of Black people, a lot of women that are targeting me too. So it's not only like non-Black people who are targeting me. You have Black people that are targeting me. Everyone is targeting me for something else, for something different, because, they've been basically programmed and influenced to target me. They knew what buttons to push to get them worked up and to make me a target. And some people, they just go with the flow and just conform, right? So as far as class is concerned, there were people who participated and said nothing. And I can say that within that setting, the demographics of students included a variety of different people. So we had a police officer in the program. There was a doctor of psychology who's, Afro-Latino, and other people of color that were in the program. Majority of the people in the program were women. We had an HR director. So that's just to give you like more context. These are all people, right? In our world, in the world that we live in, these are all people that are supposed to protect, supposed to do what's right, that are supposed to stand up, for people that are being persecuted and oppressed. But these people were actively participating in the harassment, right? And so that's just to give you more context as to, okay, this ripple effect, you have this demographic of people, from different backgrounds and different ethnicities and things like that, but they were all basically participating willfully in targeting Marie. And then in the instance of the doctor of psychology, this particular person at one point, actually, he seemingly stood up for me briefly. And that was when I called what was happening in class. And this was basically, it was the end of the semester, and we were just reflecting back on, what we've learned and things like that. And I chose that as my moment to basically reflect on the harassment and things that were happening to me. And I spoke out in class, and I spoke about, and I actually used that quote, the most disrespected person is the Black woman, and things like that. And, I went over my spiel about, being, stalked and harassed and things like that. And he spoke up briefly, and, the professor actually in class, he was trying to silence me actually and victim blame me. He was like, okay, yeah, we'll talk about it another time. And he was actually victim blaming me because someone had made a comment, because this was a Zoom class right after I said it. Someone made a comment about spy school, right? And spy school, and it's just like the timing, right? So the timing of it, I am talking about what I've gone through, and, you're making this comment. To me, that felt like, yeah, it was a subliminal. Although, the teacher was saying, well, my son was talking to me about spy school and things like that. And so that's what, no. This was targeted. And the interesting thing about it, like a lot of people, they message me privately, right? They didn't message me so that the whole group could see it. Then, oh, I'm sorry this is happening to you. There was another woman, she's Latina. She reached out to me, and actually she worked for the university. She was part of, I think, the DEI department or something like that. She reached out to me and she was like, oh, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Oh, that's so sad. I hope I haven't done anything to offend you. Meanwhile, she's actively participating in the harassment. So there was a lot of, phonies, a lot of people, basically they thought, I think what happened, why some of the people that were participating were standing up, is because they thought, oh no, she's on to us and, she's speaking up. She might have something weighty enough to, get us all in trouble. So now let me try to get on her good side. Right. So I was just like, okay, yeah, I can't trust you. I can't, you know what I mean? And there was another Black woman too, of Caribbean descent, that was also actively participating, and she was an older woman, and it's just kind of like, wow, there's no age limit for people to do these things. Like, she should be the one that would be saying, well, guys, like, we shouldn't be doing this to this woman or whatever. No, she was actually actively participating, but then she private messaged me saying, oh yeah, I'm sorry this is happening. Meanwhile, she was part of it. So yeah, it didn't matter, what their profession was, what they identified as in terms of ethnicity or, sexual orientation or what have you. They were all basically participating. And then, like, going back to that doctor that spoke up, it was brief, because I think maybe a couple of days later, I think it was a couple of days later, I think we had met up because I was like, oh, okay, like, I have an ally now. I wanted to speak to him about what happened. And then he started to tell me, oh, Marie, maybe you're being paranoid about it, right? The doctor of psychology. And he knew it was happening. But now he basically all of a sudden had a change of heart. And I think, this is my just theory here, I think maybe someone might have gotten back to him and threatened him. And so he was probably like, oh, okay, I better keep quiet because I don't want to be the next target. I don't know. But he was one of the people, like in the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that in the class setting, there were instances where people didn't participate, but they didn't speak up, right? So he was one of the people that I would say in one of the classes where we had that final presentation where he decided not to participate in the class presentation, and he did a one-on-one presentation with the professor because I believe he didn't want to be one of these people that were basically using their presentation to subliminally harass me. So, I mean, I guess I could say thank you for that, but if you had information to speak up and you didn't, and you were actually adding to the psychological harassment, even after I said, I basically expressed what I was going through. I was going through these things. You were receiving these messages too. You were receiving the images and things like that, and you didn't speak up. And you're supposed to be helping people with mental wellness and psychology, and you actually contributed to my trauma. So shame on you for that, doctor of psychology. So in any event, so that is basically, the examples that I have as it relates to the ripple effect in the school setting. And that's just a few examples, right? That's not just like in-depth examples, but hey, I just want to give examples in different settings of how people conform and how, one student will basically share. We had some ringleaders, right, in the class that would basically, anytime it would be a new class and there would be new students, they would taint them and they would start sharing information with them. Now, as far as like where I've lived in the past, I've asked a few neighbors, not too many. I've mentioned that, okay, this is happening. If you know anything, please let me know. And no one spoke up. No one spoke up. I do think some people were sincere because they didn't know, because these people, I believe, were not targeted or were not enlisted in the targeting campaign because they knew that I had a close relationship with those people, and so they didn't try to reach out to them. But, there were people that I believe knew that didn't say anything, and now that could have been because they were protecting themselves, because they didn't want to be, that next target. And hey, I can't blame them for that. But, I guess some deep down inside, I wish someone would speak up or would have spoken up some way, somehow, even if it was anonymously, right? So, now, as I've said before, I'm not a perfect victim, right? So, I know that some people that may have come across content or information on their phone, that may have been offended, and, I would think they would have asked me, right? And whether if it's, if everything they said, I said, or if I subscribe to everything, I still don't think that warrants the abuse and the treatment that I've been getting, the violation of my privacy, the human rights violation. Even if every single thing that has been put out there is true, the treatment, the human rights violation is not right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think I am, who you think I am, what beliefs you think I have. The treatment is not right. The treatment is wrong. The treatment is wrong. And a lot of the things that are happening, right? Maybe not the end result, right? Maybe not what you're seeing, but how they came about it is, there are a lot of illegal things that are happening, within that context. Maybe you're innocently receiving a message, right? So that aspect is not illegal, but a lot of other things that are happening behind the scenes are illegal, and violating someone's privacy, violating their human rights, contributing to digital abuse, whether that's digital sexual abuse, and all sorts of other things, is wrong. So, I don't know what to say. I don't know what else to say about this. I know I had put up a short YouTube clip a few days ago just about, urging people to speak up, urging people, not to conform, not to be blindly led, and not to be intimidated, right? Maybe you're being intimidated or blackmailed. I'm sorry if that has happened to you. And so, obviously, I don't want you to be the next target, obviously. So, if you feel like you're going to be the next target, so, be careful. I'm not going to ask you to speak up, but if you in any way, shape, or form have the ability to speak up, or even have the ability to say that it's wrong, or even have the ability to not participate, I'm just urging you to do the right thing. I just, I don't know what else to say. I just know that this is a very strategic campaign. They know what buttons to push. They know how to get people angry and upset. And, if you think about the whole voting collusion thing that they had, and how people were being manipulated in the elections, it's similar, right? So, they're using algorithms, they're using bots, they're using things to basically manipulate people into doing what they want them to do. And it's a mixture of truth and lies. So, a little bit of truth, some lies, and some things are just completely, absolutely made up. And so, but some people, they believe everything they see. And, again, even if every single thing that you saw or that you heard or that you read is or was true, I still don't see why or how it justifies what is happening, what is being done to me, and how I'm being targeted, and how people are basically trying to destroy my life, right, in every aspect. It's just not right. I've already mentioned social media. I talked about the infiltration of different things in whether it's a Christian platform or whatever. And so when you look at the manipulation that's happening, it's social media. It's a combination of algorithmic manipulation, people sharing info on group chats, which ends up being challenges in plants, and essentially because these people are monitoring me, right? So they plant individuals and or contact individuals who listen to similar channels and have them infiltrate and get in the ears of these channel hosts. So they think they are hearing from a genuine subscriber, they're hearing from a plant, or they are basically being manipulated by the algorithm, to target me. And they don't realize that it's part of the programming, it's part of the manipulation, and that's essentially what's happening. And that's happened. So it's happened in every realm, aspect, and I gave a lot of examples. I hope I didn't bore you to death, but I just really wanted to kind of show how in every instance, in every setting where at least one person, not one person, at least to the best of my knowledge, right? Again, I don't have full visibility. I don't know if other people have been speaking up for me and I just don't know about it. Or I don't know if other people have been saying, hey, this is wrong. Or if people would say, hey, you know what? Whatever she did, I don't care. I'm not going to participate in this. Maybe there are people that is doing that, but I'm not aware of it. What I've been seeing is that people are just basically following blindly. And so here you have the ripple effect, right? So, why is no one speaking up again? I think, again, people are offended by a tactic, maybe a text message, maybe a rumor. And instead of questioning it, they let that offense ripple into suspicion, and others are afraid. They're afraid that if they speak up, they'll be targeted too. And so some may even be pressured or threatened or lured into participating. I mentioned that before, in the example of the app that I was using, for services. So that's the ripple effect of harm. So it's not just silence, it's complicity. And so it's people becoming part of the very thing they once claimed to oppose. And it's very sad. And I gave examples of people from different demographics, different professions, that have participated in this. Things, people that you think would not have participated, right? I gave you an example of a doctor of psychology, right? They're supposed to help in situations like that. They're making it worse. And I even saw something. It was a post I saw a while ago. This person, is she in psychology? I don't know if she's a coach or a therapist. She's kind of under that umbrella, not necessarily a doctor. And she was basically trolling online. And it was on her LinkedIn profile, actually. And I was very disgusted by this because this is, again, someone that's supposed to be helping individuals that deal with trauma, that deal with this kind of situation, and you're actually participating in this. So, I'm just calling for people to speak up, or at the very least, think for yourself as opposed to going on with the crowd. Maybe you think you're thinking for yourself, but I'm here to tell you you're being manipulated. as I said, my privacy has been violated. I think that, this is a human rights violation. It's not exposure. Oh, it's not about being exposed, or, people talk about this all the time. Yeah. Or I've seen, reckoning. Reckoning of what? Reckoning of what? Reckoning of what? Your God now? Reckoning of what? I think, it's not exposure, because it's like you're doing something, you're willfully participating in violating someone's privacy, human rights, and you're contributing to abuse, right? Different types of digital abuse, right? Whether it's hacking, your phone is being used as a botnet to hack into someone's network, right? You're accessing someone's information that is not supposed to be consumed. Something, the most private moments of someone's life is being basically disseminated online. And it's not about information that was leaked, right? It's information that is constantly being extracted. Because I tell you, I kid you not, every single day, people are coming to where I live. They are parking outside of my apartment, basically, to try to extract information, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere I go. So, I mean, I just want to close out with a few scriptures about speaking up. And I shared those scriptures on the post that I made the other day on YouTube. And they were just like visual scriptures, but I just want to speak those scriptures out loud. And it's just a couple. We're going to see that the word of God doesn't leave us room to stay silent or to participate in evil. And some people may think they're doing the work of God because they're exposing a witch or whatever, right? Because some people want to call me a witch, right? You could do whatever. You can call me whatever. Even if I was a witch, whatever you're doing to me, I don't deserve it. And it's not right. It's not right in God's eyes either. It's not right in God's eyes. So learn to do right. Seek justice. Defend the oppressed. Take up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. That's from Isaiah 1:17. And Proverbs 31:8-9 says, speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. These verses are clear. God calls us to defend. God calls us to speak. God calls us to act, and to break the ripple of harm with a ripple of justice, to refuse both silence and participation. So that is my call out, right? This is what I'm calling out. Speak up. I mean, the enemy's strategy is simple, right? It's offense, manipulation, intimidation, threats. These are tactics of control. They condition people to ripple harm instead of doing what's right. But God has his own ripple, right? One act of courage, one word of courage, one prayer of faith can shift the atmosphere. So, I've always been a very outspoken person. I've always spoken out what's wrong, whether it's being done to someone else or myself. So, right now, because no one else is speaking up for me, no one else has been advocating for me. So I have to speak up for myself, and I'm asking others to speak up, speak out, even if it's anonymously. I do understand the dynamics of the situation, and so I don't want anyone to put themselves in harm's way. But if you can, speak up, or at the very least, don't participate in the nonsense. That's what I'm praying for. That's what I'm asking for. And remember, your silence is not neutral, and your participation is not harmless, right? It's not just another social media post. It's not just another challenge. Oh, it's not just you, walking outside and doing something or subliminally harassing me or coming or following me to the store or downloading information. You are contributing to the harm. I'm asking, for us to break the ripple of harm, to break the ripple of silence. Don't let fear, offense, or manipulation decide your voice. I'm asking you to refuse to join the crowd, at least the crowd of harm, and refuse to be used, right? Refuse to be used for the enemy's work. Even one voice can start a new ripple, one that spreads light, justice, and freedom. Thank you for listening. This is Marie, and this is the Diary of a Sane Black Woman. I hope to have more for you. I'll see you soon in the next episode. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your patience. I know this episode is a little longer, but I just needed to basically share my my experiences and let you know all what's going on, what I've experienced, and what I continue to experience. So let's stop the ripple of harm and the ripple of silence. Thank you for listening. This is the Diary of a Sane Black Woman.